Donald Trump tries to reach across the aisle and appeal to his base during his first State of the Union to a divided House. The president adding that after nearly 2 decades of war, the time had come to try for peace in Afghanistan. Venezuela's army blocks a bridge on the border with Colombia. Forces loyal to Nicolas Maduro fear humanitarian aid coming into the country would lay the groundwork for a US-led invasion. And the European Commission derails a planned merger between Alstom and Siemens. The boss of the German giant slams the decision, saying it highlights the need for structural reform of the European Union. It's good to have you with us here on France 24. Now, in his first State of the Union address to a divided House, Donald Trump made calls for bipartisanship, but the U.S. president did appeal to his base and made the case for a border wall with Mexico once again. He called for legal immigration a threat to the safety and economic security of Americans. Trump tried to appeal to Democrats with calls to end the HIV epidemic in the country in the next 10 years, as well as lower the cost of prescription drugs. Alison Sargent reports.
It was Donald Trump's first State of the Union before a divided Congress. And with signs of opposition visible around him, from Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to the Democratic lawmakers wearing white as a symbol of women's suffrage, the president started off with an appeal for unity.
We must choose between greatness or gridlock, results or resistance, vision or vengeance, incredible progress or pointless destruction. Tonight, I ask you to choose greatness.
In his hour and 22-minute speech, the president touched on subjects with bipartisan appeal, like a new criminal justice law and calls to end childhood cancer and eradicate AIDS. But Trump doubled down on the issue that led to the nation's longest ever government shutdown, immigration, which he insists is an urgent national crisis.
In the past, most of the people in this room voted for a wall, but the proper wall never got built. I will get it built.
Trump also railed against what he called ridiculous partisan investigations, which he warned would ruin the U.S. economy. In his words, the hottest economy anywhere in the world. One comment did draw enthusiasm from Democrats when the president saluted the number of women in the workforce. Democratic women who won seats in last year's midterm elections gave themselves a standing ovation.
You weren't supposed to do that.
The president will need to keep a unifying tone with Democrats in the next 2 weeks if he wants to strike a deal and avoid another shutdown. The deadline for government funding is on February 15th.
Now, while Donald Trump did not give a specific date on when U.S. troops in Syria would be heading home, he did say he didn't want the United States fighting endless wars. Pointing the finger at Afghanistan, he said negotiations to reach a political settlement have accelerated, adding that after nearly 2 decades of war, the time had come to try for peace. Take a listen.
In Afghanistan, my administration is holding constructive talks with a number of Afghan groups, including the Taliban. As we make progress in these negotiations, we will be able to reduce our troops' presence and focus on counter-terrorism, and we will indeed focus on counter-terrorism.
Earlier, I spoke to Hamid Hakimi, lead researcher on Afghanistan at Chatham House, and asked him what progress the U.S. had made in negotiations with the Taliban when just yesterday the group carried out an attack on an army base in Kunduz.
What President Trump is talking about is the direct talks that the U.S. official envoy for reconciliation in Afghanistan, Ambassador Khalilzad, is doing at the moment with the Taliban. So he's held a series of rounds of talks with the Taliban in Doha. Taliban representatives are currently in Moscow speaking to a number of political elites from Afghanistan. This is not where the Americans are speaking to them, but for the first time, at least in public domain, we know that the Americans and the Taliban are speaking face to face, and that they are actually putting the details of some of those conversations that they've had out to media. So from that angle, yes, it's a new thing that is progress of some sort, I would say.
So, yes, the U.S. president has admitted that there have been negotiations underway. Is that an admission that the conflict over the last, 19-odd years has failed, essentially?
I think for at least a decade, there has been admission by all parties, at least, if not overtly, but to some extent, that this war in Afghanistan required a political settlement. With a massive upsurge of troop levels since 2001 at various stages, particularly before 2014. The Taliban insurgency was not defeated, if I could use that term, and various kinds of tactics deployed by the international military presence in Afghanistan could not bring the levels of violence and the Taliban's insurgency strength to lower levels. So I think the admission that there should be a political settlement is nothing new. But what is new is the momentum and also the fact that Americans are actually leading on that momentum. The Taliban for many, many, many years have been asking for direct conversations with the Americans because they've always felt, or at least in the narrative, they put out this argument that the Americans are the other party to the conflict, that's their opponent, and that they wanted only to speak to the Americans, and that's happening at the moment as we speak.
In other news, the Venezuelan army has blocked a bridge on the border with Colombia. Forces loyal to Nicolas Maduro fear humanitarian aid coming into the country would lay the groundwork for a U.S.-led invasion. Opposition leader Juan Guaido, who has been recognized as interim president by a number of countries, including France and the United States, says 300,000 people risk death if the aid isn't delivered. Peter O'Brien reports.
Every day, more than 50,000 people enter Colombia through Cúcuta. They're mostly Venezuelans, in search of food and treatment which is not available at home.
There's nothing in Venezuela. We can't find medicine. Nothing. Not even vaccines for my baby.
Families that have 2, 3, 4 kids are suffering because they don't have enough to feed their children.
The United States is sending trucks of food and medicine to the city. It will be stockpiled until it's allowed to cross the border, after being requested by Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido, who says 300,000 Venezuelans are at risk of dying if aid does not arrive. The Red Cross has agreed to distribute it once it's in the country, but the question is how it will get through in the first place. President Nicolas Maduro has insisted that nothing will enter.
The Venezuelan Red Cross is going to act to the extent requested once the humanitarian aid is in the country, preparing and distributing the humanitarian aid once we receive it.
The Venezuelan military has barricaded one of the bridges on the border, despite the opposition-led National Assembly warning the armed forces not to block the aid. The army makes up much of Nicolas Maduro's power base. He said humanitarian aid would be the first sign of a US-led invasion.
Now, for more on the situation at the Colombian border with Venezuela, here's our correspondent Paula Carrillo reporting.
We are here in Cúcuta. We are just in front of the Tienditas Bridge, which is where the humanitarian aid is going to arrive, according to Colombian authorities. And even if there is no information about the date of arrival, there are some Venezuelan people coming here just because of the news, because they want to get some of this humanitarian aid. What they say is that they don't have food or medical supplies in Venezuela. They don't have medicines, and this is why they expect this humanitarian aid urgently.
Now, in some news just coming into us here in the France 24 newsroom, at least one person has been confirmed dead after an 8-story building collapsed in Istanbul. For now, it's not clear why the structure has collapsed. An investigation has been opened. According to the governor of the city, the building had 14 apartments. We'll bring you more news on that developing story as we get it. Now, the British Prime Minister will be in Brussels tomorrow. Theresa May looking for a way to ensure an orderly Brexit as the March 29 deadline fast approaches. Ahead of her visit, the Irish Prime Minister was in Brussels to ensure Dublin's interests are protected. Standing alongside Leo Varadkar, the President of the European Council issued a warning to London that the deal on the table won't be renegotiated. He even had words to those who had called for a Brexit in the first place. Take a listen.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
Donald Tusk speaking there. Next, the chief executive of Siemens has hit out at the European Commission after the merger of the German giant's rail arm with France's Alstom was derailed. Joe Kaiser said it highlighted the urgent need for structural reform in the European Union, but Europe's competition commissioner defended her decision, saying the merger would have led to higher prices and less choice. Cole Stangler reports.
A bold move from the European Commission, blocking a multi-billion-euro merger that would have linked the rail divisions of two industrial giants, Siemens and Alstom.
To be clear, it's fine to be big. That's not the issue here. But we found that competition from other suppliers would have been insufficient to replace the considerable loss of competition due to the merger.
The two markets the EU says would have most suffered: railway signaling and high-speed trains. The decision puts an end to months of investigation into the proposed merger, first announced in September 2017. France's Alstom and Germany's Siemens would have created a railway titan with an annual turnover of over 15 billion euros. The proposal was backed heavily by Germany and France, where the country's economy minister said the Commission's decision risked benefiting China.
The European Commission's decision is first and foremost an economic error, and then it's a political mistake because the European Commission's decision will strengthen Chinese industry and weaken European industry.
The annual revenue of China's railcar producing CRRC, 26 billion euros, 3 times as big as either of Europe's leading counterparts.
Now, a few political leaders will escape ridicule at this year's Nice Carnival when it opens later in the month. Presidents Emmanuel Macron, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will all feature as giant clowns aboard the event's floats to chime in with the theme of the King of Cinema. Ivana Scatola has a story.
It's said politics and theatre go hand in hand, and this year's Nice Carnival will embrace just that with its theme King of Cinema. Presidents Trump, Putin and Macron will join the likes of Harvey Weinstein and Charlie Chaplin centre stage at the event, cast as cackling clowns. Artists and sculptors have been working for weeks to build and decorate the giant figures that deck the carnival's iconic floats.
We imagine that's how the characters are perceived. They create fear all around the world. And that's sort of the point of Carnival, to bring that out through colours and costumes.
The theme itself is actually in honour of the 100th anniversary of Victorine Studios, a pillar of the film industry in the south of France. The Carnival, held in Nice since 1873, draws visitors from all over the country and from abroad too. All are looking forward to the colour and humour the Carnival will bring to the Mediterranean city.
Politics is a bit of cinema, so it's good to mix the two.
We all go as a family and really enjoy ourselves, and it's a lovely time, and it's good for the town of Nice, good for the city of Nice, that everyone comes together again after things that have happened, and yeah, it's a lovely place.
Le Carnival, dubbed as France's first gay carnival, also features in the middle of the 2-week-long event. The carnival runs from the 16th of February until the 2nd of March.
That's it from me, from all of us on the team. Thank you very much for watching.